truth.
Hello, and welcome to Word of Truth Podcast. Our mission is to shine the light of biblical truth on the questions of life. Hosted by Stephen Brown and Stone Anderson. Enjoy the show.
Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is true. Yeah. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is true. Yeah. Word of truth.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Word of Truth podcast. I'm here with Stephen Brown, your host.
Hello.
And I am Stone Anderson. Stone like rock. You know, it's crazy how many people cannot figure out my name. Stone, they'll say, Don.
Yeah.
I've even had one guy say, Dome. And I was like, what is... Okay.
Dome.
Anyway.
I'm going to call you Dome.
No, don't. The most famous one's Pebbles.
Oh, well,
but-
yeah, I can see that one. Yeah.
Today we're going to be talking about relative truth versus absolute truth.
Just truth in general, yeah.
Yeah, truth in general. So I'll let you define absolute truth, and then you throw it back to me, and I'll see if I can define relative truth.
Okay, well, I mean, let me give you sort of the accepted definition of truth, and then I'll give you
You got something on your arm that's bothering me.
a little bit of philosophy of truth. That's where I cut that battery wrapper off. It took us like an hour to get the show started because we had equipment problems as usual. Okay. Accepted definition of truth. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. Or you might use the term, truth is in accordance with reality. Truth agrees with what is real. And I think that's a really good definition. Part of the philosophy of truth, though, well, if that definition is true, then that means that all truth is absolute truth. And if it's not the absolute truth, then it's not the truth. It's not necessarily a lie, because a lie has intention, but it's false. If it's not the absolute truth, then it is false. And, well, I'm going to let you define relative truth, and we'll talk about some biblical things.
I would say, I don't know, I can't give you like a Wikipedia definition. It would be
Yeah, no, it's fine.
probably relative truth would probably be something like pertaining to a certain individual's beliefs. So like, I mean, we've all heard, if we haven't heard, we probably will hear, well, you have your truth and I have mine. Mm-hmm. Like relative truth is that we're sitting at this table. That is the truth. Mm-hmm. But if I said, well, no, we're sitting outside in the grass, that's my truth. That would be.
It can go that far, sure enough. It can.
I mean, it goes further than that, honestly. But anyway.
If you believe that truth is relative to the mind that interprets it, then it can. What are you going to say when, a 40-year-old man comes up and says, I identify as a 12-year-old girl? And he says, that's my truth.
If that's your worldview?
Yeah, if relative truth is your worldview.
To not be a hypocrite, you have to say, I support you. That's your truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you can say, well, that's not my truth, but it doesn't matter. If you have already said you have your truth and I have my truth.
Well, then there are no truths.
There is no truth. There is no such thing as truth.
It's just everybody do whatever they want and say it's the right thing in their own eyes, basically.
Yeah, because it makes communication impossible. It makes meaningful communication impossible. And what it really boils down to is, if there were a such thing as relative truth, it means every single individual is living in their own reality. That's what it would really mean. Because if truth is that which corresponds to reality, and if it actually were true for them, then that means it corresponds to their reality.
Which would mean every single person in some way or another is in their own. Yeah.
Is it right?
That makes
that
sense.
means
Yeah.
you have your own reality. I have my own reality. You know, you may be living on another planet in your mind, and here we are on planet Earth in my mind. And, you know, to me, the tree is green and has leaves on it. To you, the tree may be red with no leaves on it. And it's like, well, the thing is, you know, maybe that's a poor example using the colors, because there is a certain aspect of color that does have an interpretive factor because of the differences of human eye, right? But the fact that there is color, and whatever the color is what it is.
So you're saying, I see a tree is green, but a colorblind sees it and maybe it's gray. Mm-hmm. So I'm seeing green, he's seeing gray, but the truth is it's green. He just doesn't have the ability to see it.
Correct.
Okay.
The truth is that whatever color it is that's radiating off of those leaves, that's what color it is. And, you know, 99 or more out of 100 people is going to see what its true color is, which is green. And though he doesn't see it that way because he's colorblind, it doesn't mean that it's gray. You know what I'm saying?
It kind of reminds me of someone who claims to be of the different gender. It doesn't matter what they think it is. In reality, they're still what they were born as, physically. I'm correlating to them.
Yeah. And like you said, when we talked about this whole gender issue, which, by the way, you may think, oh, the truth issue is boring. Who cares whether or not truth is absolute? This is philosophy. This is Aristotle junk. This is 2,000 years old. We're way past that. You may think that's the case. And you may be concerned with whether or not life begins at conception in the abortion issue. You may be concerned with whether or not gender neutrality should be accepted. You may be concerned with whether or not there's such a thing as gay marriage. But listen, every single one of those issues are 100% connected and embedded to the issue of whether or not truth is relative.
Like the foundation.
Yes.
Without truth, none of that matters.
Right. And you may think, oh, why waste time talking about truth, relative truth, when we got all this gender stuff going on, all this LGBT stuff going on? Well, the reason that stuff is going on is because the world has lost its mind and lost the concept, the understanding of what truth is. Truth is, when we look at its definition, it is inseparable from reality. That's really what it is. It's inseparable. Even if, let's say there's 8 billion people on Earth, okay? Even if all 8 billion people fail simultaneously to get the truth of a certain situation, the truth was still there. You know, every one of us get something wrong. The whole world may be asked the answer to an equation, and the whole world may all get it wrong, but whatever the right answer was
always there.
It was always there. You know, ready to be discovered, perhaps we missed it, but the truth is so connected to reality. Now, obviously, we're Christians. That makes perfect sense in a Christian worldview, because Pilate stood before Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago and said, what is truth? Because Pilate come and said to Jesus, they accuse you of this, they accuse you of that. And he says, you say that I'm a king? He said, but I have come to do this task, to bear witness of the truth. Pilate says, what is the truth? And then Jesus gives him his answer, and I wish I could remember exactly what it is. But what we know in the end of the story is Jesus said, I am the truth. I am the truth and the way and the life. Now, he didn't literally mean that he's sort of this abstract concept, but I do know this, that truth itself is embedded in reality because all of reality exists within the mind of God. And so we don't have our own reality. We do not. I mean, there is a real world out there. I'm not saying that. I shouldn't say perhaps that we just exist within the mind of God, because that's not entirely true, and that's not the way to look at it. But what I am saying is the fact that the universe continues to... You're
saying if you take God out of the equation, everything else ceases to exist because he is...
Yes. Well, as the Bible says, all things are upheld by his power, by the word of his power. All things were called into existence by his word, and it says, and by the same word, all things are held into existence. And that word is the word logos, which is actually from logic, his mind. His mind created us. His mind continues to sustain us. The power, the essence of God is the very fabric of all reality in that sense. If he quit willing it into existence, it would cease to exist. And so because of that, we all exist in one reality. We can try and pretend we don't all you want to, but like, let's just say if you looked at me and said, you have your truth and I have my truth. Now, there's a lot of ways to defend that, okay? But one way is just to look back at that person and say, well, I'm about to call the cops on you because, you confessed to me last night that you was the one that robbed that bank 10 years ago and got away. And you also ran over that little kid on a bicycle and killed him and never told anybody. Now, as soon as I start saying that,
that ain't true. No,
I
you're wrong.
didn't say that. I'll be like, no, that's my truth. You're guilty. You robbed a bank. No, I didn't rob a bank. What are you talking about? Yes, you did. If I have my truth, you are guilty and you should go to jail. And suddenly they're going to stand there in the court of law and they're going to say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And then they're going to say, I did not do that. And what he's saying is not true. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
They're going to totally back down on their
I was actually thinking about a court of law kind of scenario, and I thought, if someone said that to me, basically all I have to say is, well, actually, imagine this. Let's just say there's a murderer.
Okay.
And then there's, a lady who maybe she's talking with that murderer, and she says, you have your truth and I have mine. Well, he goes, okay, well, I'm going to jail tomorrow, so my truth is you killed the man, not me, and so now you're going to jail. And she's going to say, no, I'm innocent. That's a lie. That's not the truth. And so it's like, it's too much of a mess,
right,
in all honesty.
Yeah, it is a mess.
There's one standard of truth, not 100 million different opinions.
Yeah, and if you're trying to figure out who's actually right, okay, one guy says there's no such thing as absolute truth. One guy says there is. If we apply a tiny, tiny speck of logic to it, it tells you who's right off the bat.
I like the one when someone says you have your truth and I have mine. I like the response you hear a lot is that true?
Is that true? Yeah.
And then
if they say there is no absolute truth, you say, is that true?
And then to hold true to their worldview, they have to say, well, that's your truth. And then,
well, if they say there's no absolute truth, because I did this with my cousin about 8 years ago, because he actually said that to me on the phone one night. He said, I don't believe in absolute truth. I said, is that absolutely true? And he realized his conundrum immediately. If he says yes, then that means there is an absolute truth. He's accepting that that's absolutely true. And if he says no, then he's also accepting that he's wrong. And so he didn't know what to say. But it does actually prove, we've talked about this before, people are standing on that foundation of absolute truth with every statement that they make. Well, with the whole... One more example with the relative truth thing. Yeah. Nobody believes that way when it comes to numbers and bank accounts and money and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
That's true. They won't. Yeah. You don't call the bank. I think it was you I heard give this example. You don't call the bank and say, how much money do I have in there? And they say, 600. No, I want an exact number.
Yeah. Yeah, and I could just say, well, according to my truth, I'm looking at the screen here, and you've got about $50, and the guy may be a millionaire,
And no, I want to know exactly how much is in there. I want the truth, not your truth.
Yeah, that's the thing. People can't live, and they don't live consistently with what they say that they believe about the world. And we hear it all the time. I mean, everybody knows somebody who says, you have your truth, I have my truth, or they say, own your truth. I've been hearing that a lot lately. Own your truth. I mean, they post this junk on Facebook like it's deep and inspiring. Own your truth. Stone, if all truth is absolute, guess what else that means? There is no such thing as your truth. Even that statement is false.
It's the truth.
It's the truth. If they wanted to say own the truth, I'm all for it. Yes. But own your truth, that's already a false statement.
Why don't you just say own your opinion?
There you go, because that's what it really is. And that's the problem. The world has redefined the terminology. They don't know that they've done it, because we talked about this the other day, and I'm not knocking your generation.
Gen Z or the millennials?
Whichever ones, millennials, Gen Z, both of them, I guess. Even my generation for the most part. We weren't taught critical thinking skills.
My generation wasn't taught how to think at all.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem, because you hand them a device and give them Google. And, well, who wouldn't just Google it?
I've heard you say, just in our church group, we'll start playing a game, and maybe you have to think of 10 ideas. And every teenager on one side's pulling out their phones, Googling best questions, and then you got all the adults like, what's the best? I'm going to think about this.
Yeah.
So
You're exactly right.
it is a problem, if we're being honest.
Yeah, when we played Pictionary after church, which we do every once in a while, we'll say, your team come up with 10 ideas, my team will come up with 10 ideas. And everybody over 30 sits there with their pen tapping their head. They're thinking about it. And everybody 20 or under, they're like, what's some good Pictionary idea? They don't know how to think of nothing for themselves.
And the problem is something like, just looking at something simple, maybe how to change the oil on a truck and saying, well, this goes here, this is, I know that's not really the best example, but being able to look at something and process it and critical think it and then create a solution, it's just, and YouTube's a great tool and all, but it's a great tool, but at the same time, it hinders you because...
Well, this is the way we're off the subject of truth here, but that's fine. We'll just add a subtitle or, a subcategory to the title of our podcast here. This is the way I have looked at it. What electricity and machines and all of that did to the manual labor part of man's ability. Let me break that down real fast before we move on. What I'm saying is this. 150 years ago, men my age, even some twice my age, could still outwork me. I mean, their bodies were fit. They didn't wake up with digital alarm clocks. Most people didn't even have an alarm clock.
Just wake up when the sun rises and go to bed when the sun...
They lived with the rhythm of the planet. Their sustenance came from the heart of the planet. I mean, like I was even reading earlier in the Garden of Eden where God put Adam out of the garden, and it says to till the ground from whence he came. And what it's saying is, so the very ground he came from is that's where he's gonna get his flesh livelihood. Till the ground, provide for himself, and that's been the case, well, since Adam, all the way down to maybe Abraham Lincoln. But then we had the Industrial Revolution, and truly, physically speaking, we're puny compared to what they were 150 years ago.
And you could do the same thing mentally.
The same thing happens mentally. So now I love tractors. I love trucks and cars and all that stuff. I love the washing machine and the dryer, and I love all of that. It's a great convenience. But our health in our bodies all over the world and all of the very developed countries, bodily health has gone down the tube, man. We only stay alive because of the chemicals that we're pumping into our blood or whatever, you know what I'm saying?
And that almost answers a question I've had is, do you ever just look at something and think, how in the world did someone come up with this and invent this? And even something simple. I mean, it could be the most simplest of ideas, and I'm like, I wouldn't even know how to take plastic and form it into this. And then I realized, now that we're talking, well, that's partly because me and every other person my age has grown up being able to order whatever you need already made and being able to look up the answer to anything.
Yeah.
Or almost anything.
Yeah, we've, for the most part, witnessed the death of critical thinking because it started with just a calculator in school. I remember when it was debated of whether or not kids should be able to have a calculator in school because teachers knew then this will, in the long run, rob their ability to do mathematics in their head, which throughout all human history, every human being had. It was an intrinsic, natural ability. Humans can just do math. You can put kids on an island, they can do math, they can figure it out. They may write different symbols, but they understand these concepts until you literally steal it away from them by replacing it with a microchip. And so that's what's really happened is your brain has now, even though these things are not plugged into your brain, they might as well be because your brain accesses it through your hand. And so the search engine has become the brain of most people. And that's also why you can ask so many people a general question and they'll give you a very similar by-the-book kind of answer because it's the Google answer. It's the Google brain that's running the world these days.
Yeah, they don't sit there and ponder on it and think about it and say, well, this is what I think. This Google answer.
Yeah, Google answer. They Google it, man. And so it has caused, I believe it's connected to a tidal wave of anxiety attacks that has manifested itself within this country in the last 20 years. 25 years ago, which is not long ago. It's not long ago at all. I had never even heard of anxiety attack.
Yeah,
I mean, and I had I went to church with probably 300 people 4 times a week. I had tons and tons of friends. I had a very, very active childhood. So that was the church I went to, 4 times a week. But we visited churches like every other week. I literally knew 1,000 people on a first name basis walk up and shake their hand when I was 16 years old, and I had never heard of anxiety attacks. But now it's like 1 out of every 3 people that's under 20, 25 years old has had one. And it's like, where did this stuff come from? There's a
bunch of it, honestly, I think came from the food industry and just probably the pharmaceutical industry. But yeah, some of it is definitely related to what you're talking about.
I'm sure the food does play a part because, thinking requires good connections in the brain. Let's say it that way. Just like cranking a car requires a good connection to a battery. Thinking requires good connections in the brain, and there literally are electrical connections in your brain. If you didn't know that, I mean, basically the whole world knows that, but not just one connection. Millions of connections in your brain. And all of that is bathing in a sort of liquid soup that we would say that's why we need electrolytes, so that these electrical signals can be transmitted through a liquid electrical field. It gets complicated, but the truth is, yes, you can get foggy brain where you just can't think right if you're like super dehydrated or super hungry or whatever, or you've been starved of salt or the magnesium, the things that your body really needs. Yeah, you can't process a thought very well. Man, these honestly, I think about this stuff all the time. These things go really deep, really fast, but it actually is this. It's the world we're living in. We live in a world where, I just hate to say it, but the majority of people have lost that true ability to think critically. And that's why they can say, there is no absolute truth. And you can say, well, is that true? And they'll say, well, of course it's true. And they don't realize, oh, I just contradicted myself. Oh, I just made a total logical blunder. Oh, if I had said this 50 years ago, they'd have kicked me out of school. They don't realize it. They don't realize the level of, they just don't realize it. So,
not to mention, they're being taught from a young age that truth is relative, and we evolved from monkeys, which, all that goes back to the Big Bang. And so when you're indoctrinated from a young age with this stuff, not to mention the LGBTQ junk, all that, that community is pushing this stuff hard, I'm sure, because it fits in with their worldview.
Yeah, you're right. It's connected to so many of the bad things that's going on in the world. And something that I have also noticed over the last 15 years. Okay, when I was 20, we used to say, I think. Now they say, I feel. Mm-hmm. They say, I feel like it's this. Oh, wait a minute. That's not a feeling. That's a thought. You're supposed to say, I think it's this. Like if I said, how many fish can you put in a 1 acre pond? I feel like it's probably 400. Oh, I feel like, what do you mean I feel like? You don't feel this. You think it. Okay? But as we sort of tried to throw truth out the window, then we had to migrate to how do you feel about it? Because however you feel about it is probably what's right. That's what's right for you.
Let's just be honest. Feelings Follow your feelings. Follow your heart is the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
It's the least trustworthy thing on the planet.
Yeah,
is
the
your
heart is.
feeling.
What is it? Deceitfully wicked
The
above
heart-
all things.
The heart is deceitful above
Who
all
can
things
know
and
it?
desperately wicked. Who can know it? Yeah.
Yeah, don't follow your heart.
Don't follow your feelings. I mean, there's. I know that you say that, and they're like, but I got to follow my heart in this, that, or the other. Well, we're not saying don't feel, and I'm not saying don't let your feelings weigh into your thoughts. But in the end, the decision should be a thought-based decision. Because honestly, it probably feels good to jump off a cliff for the first 5 seconds. It's that last 1/10 of a second when you hit the ground and you're dead that it didn't feel good anymore. So if you just go by feelings, well, I'm sure it feels good to just be free floating in the air for a while and to get that adrenaline, but it's retarded. It'll kill you.
Yeah, not to mention, so many people nowadays are on an emotional roller coaster where they're up and down. You're going to be going left and going right and going left, and you don't know where you're at, and you don't know where to go, and you don't know what truth is, and you're all messed up. Who wants to choose that?
Yeah, and the problem is so many didn't choose it, but that's what has been handed to them through we talked about that, the education system. That is the condition. Look at our country, and just pretend our country was one person rather than 330 million, and just look at how this one person that we call America is behaving. Boy, America is on an emotional roller coaster, man. It's just from one extreme to the other. And it's no coincidence either that we go Democrat president, Republican president, Democrat president, Republican. It's all mirroring this psychological thing that's going on within the minds of the people, man. We're on a major roller coaster. I wish that they would start teaching the laws of logic, the laws of critical thinking, the ability to critically think, the rules of absolute truth and all that. I wish they would start teaching that as a school subject in place of sex education or something like that. And we would honestly be seeing coming out of the schools such
more
I
productive.
don't even know the words. Yeah, better mentally fit. We put so much emphasis on physical fitness and none on mental fitness. And we do. We talk about it all the time. I feel bad for how many times I say it, that we have a generation of kids out there that don't know how to think, don't know how to process, don't know how to problem solve.
It's it's not even thinking. It's they don't know how to. They can't even hardly figure out how to mow a yard the best way. What do I do? I mean, I'm telling you, I say it all the time.
I know. I mean, we got a friend who's probably going to watch this podcast right here, but he didn't know how to tell the difference between a living chicken and a dead one.
It's true. I mean, even me, when I first started working with you, he was probably thinking, man, this kid has no ability to critical think for himself.
I had to have some patience, but yeah, it can be taught. That's the good news. I still got all that battery junk all over my arm. I cut it off there. Yeah, critical thinking can be taught. But, well, just like that right there, we had the battery wasn't working, and I realized it was the wrapper that was interfering with the contact, and so I took a knife and shaved it off. But I guarantee you, anybody else would just been like, we're just going to have to go buy a new machine.
Yeah.
Go
buy new batteries and see if they work.
Yeah, go buy new batteries. If that don't work,
call a repairman.
Yeah, call somebody.
Because here's one thing. We've totally left the truth.
Yeah, that's fine. It's okay.
Here's one thing. It's like all of the boomer generation, their kids, I don't even know what generation that is. It's right above millennials. What are you?
You're talking about the children of the boomers?
Yeah.
I don't know what my generation
X or
is
Y or
called.
something. I don't know. Either way.
I was born in the 80s. That's what I know.
Okay.
I don't know what that generation is called.
I don't
but
know.
I'm like a grandkid to the boomers, right? Because the boomers were 22 years old.
My grandpa is a boomer.
He's a
the
baby of a boomer.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, the boomers were the ones that were 24 years old when World War II ended, and they come home from the war, and boom, babies were born everywhere, right? So he's a child of a boomer.
Okay, my point is, we're getting sidetracked on that too. The baby boomer generation and the children of the boomers, they have that ability to critical think. I mean, think about it.
Your grandfather fixes every problem that arises in his life himself.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of his generation, like I've heard other people say, and my mom say, I don't know what I'm going to do when Daddy's gone, because he fixes. If I have a broken refrigerator, he'll come pull it out and just fix it. And the generation growing up, they don't know what to do, and that's why honestly, a skilled laborer so important now because no one else knows how to do stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, with this generation, if you say, why is water coming out of the faucet? They'll say, because you turned the handle. And if you say, well, where's the water coming from? They'll be like, I don't know. You just turn the handle, water comes out. That's what happens, you know? So, like, what happens if I turn the handle and water doesn't come out? Call a plumber. They're not thinking about, okay, what's all the variables and factors that's playing into whether or not water's coming out of this pipe? Well, the water's coming from somewhere. Do I have well water? Am I on a city water supply? Is it trickling? Is there something blocking the pressure? You know, to analyze and critically think, diagnose, find the problem, and fix it. They don't have it. But yeah, I mean, I guess I have thought this way for years that it was people my age we're kind of split. Some people my age are just with everything, you know, just dingy. And some, I guess, that were still raised by people who had those sort of boomer values or whatever. Some of us can virtually fix anything. We're jack of all trades. Because there's many out there that's like me. But yeah, I mean, when our dryer went down, and you just take the thing apart, you fix it, you figure out what it is. Is it a board? Is it a heating element? Is it a fan? Is it the rollers? Whatever. You know, you take the thing apart, you fix it. And the fridge goes down, you take it apart, you fix it. With no training, you just understand these things, and people nowadays don't have a clue, man. I mean, you know, you work at a garage door place. Mm-hmm. They call, they say, my garage door's messed up. I'm in a panic. I can't get my car out. You say, well, what's it doing? I don't know. I hit the button. It don't work. Like, okay, does it make a sound? Is the light on the
and
button?
Sometimes you go over there to the door, and it won't raise. And all you gotta do is, like, it's not attached to the little motor. You just raise the door up. It clicks in, and it works. And they're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea.
Yeah. Or you get there and this giant spring that's obvious to every human who's ever lifted up his eyes and looked at a garage door is broken in two. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't look at that. You know, they don't. Oh, yeah, we totally got sidetracked. But it's all connected in the minds of your grandfather and some people still of my generation. The world operates in a consistent way. It's supposed to make sense. If there's a problem with the water, it's somewhere down the line. You can diagnose because everything is obeying this reality law of truth.
Yeah.
But in y'all's world, y'all don't even think that way. And so how could I ever figure it out, you know?
Yeah, it's a big mystery. Okay, so we covered absolute versus relative truth, just a hair. I'll put that in there. But while we're on the subject of critical thinking, problem solving, for all the younger generation, because even if we get 20 views, over half of them is going to be people my age,
yeah.
and especially from the church. And I know people who are more like you, right around my age, and I know people who are like me, and I'm just not kind of getting into the stage of learning how to critical think, and I know people who have no idea how to. Not to mention, I know a bunch of kids coming up who are not being taught. How would you go about, especially for somebody who doesn't have maybe a dad who's going to teach them, or maybe they're my age and it's their job to teach themselves. How do you go about learning to critical think, learning to problem solve, do you get on YouTube and just start watching random videos?
No, you don't Google anything for a year as far as a question. Like if you want to Google something for entertainment or YouTube or whatever, if you want to watch something entertaining or anything like that, then sure. But don't go to Google and say how for anything for a year. And you'll begin to develop your critical thinking because you want it fixed. You're not going to Google how to do it. You're going to force yourself to figure it out, because I could say, oh, I would maybe try and download 100 logical thinking problems or something. And those as an entertainment would actually be nice. This is going to sound psychotic, but I promise you before Lord it's actually true. One of the ways that I used to go to sleep, if I had a question in my mind that really perked my interest, like how does a magnetic field actually work? Rather than think about it right then, I would be like, oh man, that's a good, I'm gonna wait and think about that until I lay down. And I would think when I'd go to bed, I would think, oh yeah, how does a magnetic field work? And I'd lay there and I'd close my eyes and I would just begin to think about all of the possibilities in my mind of how to visualize. And I would think until I fell asleep. And I loved it. I thought about all kinds of stuff like that. And honestly, the more intensely that I had to think about it, the quicker I fell asleep because my mind was so focused. I didn't have that distracted scatterbrained, all this kind of stuff. I was very intent on something. And I would go to sleep. My wife can tell you, I'd go to sleep every night thinking about some deep question. I don't do that anymore. I don't sleep as good anymore either, though, because now I go to sleep listening to headphones, listening to podcasts or whatever, and I sleep terrible. First thing I would do, quit saying, how do you do this? Quit Googling, especially things that are easy, like Pictionary topics or charades. Just quit looking it up. Just stop and think about it yourself. I have seen it with you and Austin and different ones. Immediately y'all go to the phone. Yeah, for just almost anything. And so if you're going to change the oil in your truck, go out there, think about it, diagnose it, and honestly, that's really easy. If your battery's dead, you're going to change it, or an alternator, or starter, or something. Start forcing yourself to need your brain. At this point, you don't view your brain as something you need to use. But if you're out on an island, you suddenly realize, oh, I need this thing, and it's useless to me because I haven't trained it up.
Yeah, you could probably take somebody from 100 years ago, throw them out on an island. You come back 20 years later, and they got them the biggest house built, and they got farm animals and a big automatic fishing thing, and you throw 10 people on an island nowadays. You come back in a year, they're dead.
There's one living, and he's so ridden with guilt from cannibalizing or something. I mean, it's just terrible, man. But here's what's crazy, Stone. For 6,000 years of human history, people lived without electricity, without Google, without the internet, without phones, without even internal combustion engines driving their car around. They lived with horses, mules, and feet, and walking, and brain, man. I mean, yes, you could drop them out anywhere in the world. Wouldn't matter.
Well, like Laura Ingalls heard that Charles took his family on a wagon and just drove out in the middle of wherever they went and just said, okay, I'm going to build a house here. I'm going to build a farm here, and we're going to make it work. Like, to me, that seems like a monumental task that I would, if it was by myself,
it is a monumental task. The difference is just they could achieve the task and we can't.
No, we
can't. We lost it. We lost it so bad now that if the power just goes out for 3 weeks, somebody's dying.
Yeah, if the power went out in America for 3 weeks, it is mass chaos, probably mass death tolls. Yeah. The cities are going crazy. Yeah, people in the country are just a little bit more, but even in the country, it's not really the country. We're being honest.
So people in the city, they're prepared to live for a week. People in the country, they're prepared to live for 2 or 3, but you put the power out for 2 months and everybody's dying. Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody, very few people who are trained in survival skills, or maybe some older people who have, stocked up a cellar or something like that. But I'm talking about if you let them depend on their mind, we don't have it. We have lost the very connection, the ability to live on the planet God gave us.
Yeah, if you need food, you go to Walmart, and if Walmart's out, we're all in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, and even that does actually connect back in a lot of ways to the fact that there's an absolute truth. Because we are all, in a sense, ignoring that. We're living a lie, believing that humanity can just go on forever, fully dependent on technology to replace his muscles, his work ethic, and his thinking ability. It's not that robots will take over the world one day, which I'm speaking totally sci-fi movie stuff here. We have a biblical worldview. Jesus is coming back, and he's going to burn the world up with fire, and, there's a judgment, okay? So I'm just talking, let's just pretend the world lasts 2,000 more years or whatever. It's not that robots is going to take over the world. It's that people are going to basically atrophy so much so that we're begging for machines to take over. It's not what I'm saying is it's not that the machines want to do it. It's that we don't want to subdue the earth anymore, like the Bible says. We don't want to do that stuff. We want the machines to think for us, speak for us, plant for us and reap for us. And if you could get a machine that would eat for you, you'd probably do that too. Yeah. It's a long story. How do we even get on that, man? I don't know. Let's end it. Jesus is the truth, the way, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by him. And you got to see that he is the absolute truth. Every word that he ever spoke is the truth. That's the name of our podcast, Word of Truth.
And he proved that time and time again, because every time the Pharisees would say, we got him now, he just states the truth, and they're like, never mind.
Yeah, the truth is, sharper than any two-edged sword. The truth would just cut right to the heart of a man quicker than anything else will. Well, I was going to get into, let's just save that for another podcast. All right, Stone. We'll see you.